We're so glad to have you join us for what promises a fascinating journey through history, philosophy, and science. This webinar is organized by IPKI in collaboration with the EcoScience Foundation. For you who are new here, the EcoScience Foundation is a specialized agency of the Economic Cooperation Organization, an intergovernmental entity with 10 member states, including Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, Iran, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Turkey, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Its mandate is to promote science, technology, and innovation among the ECO member countries. IPKI is an organization committed to making the world a better place by promoting science education, fostering intellectual curiosity, and bridging gaps in access to quality learning opportunities. In today's session, we'll explore how movements like the Renaissance, Reformation, and Enlightenment created the cultural and intellectual foundation for the scientific revolution. And to guide us through this powerful historical arc, we are joined by Mr. Zeeshan Fida. Mr. Fida is a distinguished academic and researcher in the field of international relations. He currently teaches at the Department of IR at Fatma Jinnah Women University in Rawalpindi. His area of expertise includes European history, modern political thought, and the theories of IR, among many others. With a robust academic foundation and a passion for connecting past and present, Mr. Fida is uniquely equipped to shed light on how historical transformations continue to shape the world that we live in today. Without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Zeeshan.
Thank you. Thank you, Afsa, for that kind introduction. And it's a privilege to be part of this webinar. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here. So the topic of my presentation is from faith to reason, and that how European Renaissance, Reformation, and Enlightenment spark triggered the scientific revolution. So we'll explore our transformative journey in human history, that how Western civilization shifted from a worldview that was dominated by religious authority and the dogmas to the one grounded in observation, evidence, and critical thought. This transition, the change, was not sudden. It evolved through key historical developments like the Italian Renaissance, which was a cultural revivalist movement, the Reformation, the religious revivalist movement in Central Europe, which was during that time period, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason, the British Enlightenment and the French Enlightenment. So how these three developments contributed to the emergence of the scientific revolution. So I'll discuss that. So we'll also see how a rediscovery of ancient texts, particularly during the Renaissance era, and challenges to religious or hierarchy. So, and a celebration of reason and progress that created fertile ground for modern sciences. So Renaissance was more into the rediscovery of the past, the ancient texts. It was the revivalist movement, cultural revivalist movement, whereas Reformation was a religious authority, and Renaissance afterwards there was like Enlightenment, and during the age of embrace progress, and that triggered the scientific revolution. So by the end of this talk, I hope you will see scientific revolution, not as about scientific revolution, and then followed by Renaissance, the Reformation, the Enlightenment. So I'll briefly talk about these three developments, and then I'll link how these three bigger developments, and eventually the synthesis would be there, and then the legacy of these movements and how the modern world is being shaped by movements in particularly the scientific revolution, and in the end, uh, you can ask the questions and ask. And it's necessary to understand it that why it happened, and particularly why it happened in the European part of the world. So then I'll develop into three intellectual movements: the Italian Renaissance, uh, the Reformation, and the Enlightenment. And looking at the way at what these movements were and how they mattered and how they contributed towards the scientific progress. Then I'll tie these together, the fusion of these movements and how these bigger developments uh, triggered, resulted in scientific revolution, and conclude with a discussion of its long-standing legacy. So, what was scientific revolution? The time frame was from 16th to 18th centuries, and the key characteristics of the scientific revolution were observation, experimentations, and mathematical deductions and reasoning. These were the key features of scientific revolution, and the key figures were Galileo, Kepler, Newton, Copernicus. They played a key role in terms of the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution took place from 1500s to 1700s, and it marked a radical transformation in how people understood and studied the natural world. Before this, most explanations for understanding the natural phenomena were based on religious doctrines and dogmas, or the authority of ancient thinkers like Aristotle and Ptolemy. But during the scientific revolution,
Zeeshan sir,
Gigi,
sorry for the interruption. Your internet connection seems to be unstable. So I would suggest कि अगर आप अपनी वीडियो टर्न ऑफ कर लें तो ऑडियो might be not a big challenge.
okay, sure.
Just as a precaution.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. So I'm just going to.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. All right. So the scientific revolution, which started from 1500 onwards to 1700s, it was a transformation, the way people understood the natural world. And before that, prior to this, most explanations for this, for natural phenomena were based on religious doctrine or dogmas, or the authority of ancient thinkers like Aristotle and Ptolemy. But during scientific revolutions, scholars started emphasizing first-hand observations, controlled experiments, and mathematical analysis. For example, Copernicus challenged the Earth-centered view of the universe that was early given by the Greek philosophers. So Copernicus challenged the Earth-centered view of the universe by proposing that the sun, not the Earth, was at the center. And it was a radical departure at that time. Galileo used telescopic observations to support this heliocentric model and also discovered moons orbiting Jupiter, showing that not everything revolved around Earth. Kepler mathematically described planetary motions, and Newton unified physics with his laws of motion and gravity. These thinkers weren't just offering new answers, they were changing the very method by which knowledge was acquired. So, why did the scientific revolution happen in Europe? So, there were cultural and intellectual environment shifts in worldview, and legacies of the previous movements such as Renaissance, Reformation, and Enlightenment. So why did the scientific revolution happen in Europe, not somewhere else? So the answer was that in other civilizations like those in China, the Islamic world, and India, these civilizations made incredible advances in mathematics, medicine, and technology long before Europe caught up. But then, from 1700 onwards, Europe progressed in terms of knowledge. And why it happened in Europe? The answer lies in a unique set of cultural and intellectual conditions that occurred in Europe, particularly between the 14th and 18th centuries. So Europe experienced a powerful sequence of events that challenged authority, the authority of the church, and it inspired new ways of thinking and critical thought. So Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance was that it reignited curiosity to the classical learning, whereas the Reformation broke the monopoly of religious control over knowledge. The Enlightenment embraced reason and empirical thinking. So together, these movements created an environment where questioning, testing, and theorizing were just allowed, they were encouraged in Western part of the world. So this convergence made Europe fertile ground for a scientific revolution in how humans understood the natural world. So starting with the first major change, that was the Renaissance, and it was the rediscovery of knowledge, a revival of classical ancient texts, the Greek philosophy and the Roman philosophy and laws. And humanism was another key feature of the Renaissance era. It triggered curiosity. Patronage of learning and the art was another key feature of the Renaissance era. So Renaissance was actually rebirth of ancient Greek philosophy, Roman art and culture. So it was rebirth, it was a cultural revivalist move. And the hub of Renaissance was Italian city-states. So Italian city-states like Florence, Milan, Venice, these were the hub of Renaissance. These city-states were the hub of Renaissance era. So Italian city-states traded with the Ottoman Empire, with the Muslim Turks, and then because of cultural exchange and economic exchange between the Italians and the Muslim part of the world, European civilizations, Italians, they reformed themselves. They brought various reforms in mathematics. And then they even started the humanistic education and they started to work on knowledge as well. So the time period, the Renaissance that began in Italy was around 14th century. It was a cultural revivalist movement that focused on the revival of classical antiquity, especially the works of Greek and Roman thinkers. So Renaissance scholars didn't just copy ancient texts. They critically studied them, debated their ideas, and sometimes improved upon them. The Renaissance scholars, like the father of Renaissance era, is known as Patriarch. So Patriarch studied a Roman writer, Cicero. Dante, another key figure during the Renaissance era, he wrote the Divine Comedy, where he interacted with the Roman poet Virgil. So what Italian thinkers were doing, they were they were rediscovering the past, the knowledge that was lost in the Dark Ages. And they studied the Greek philosophy, the Roman law. They didn't just copy, rather, they improved upon their works. And this intellectual revivalist movement placed a new value in human reason and observation during the Renaissance era. Humanism, a key concept, a key feature of the Renaissance philosophy was it emphasized on the value and agency of human beings. Because previously, in Christian theology, the argument was that humans were wicked creature, weak, and the fallen creature. But during Renaissance era, they emphasized on the agency of human, and they argued that human beings are rational, inherently rational and good, and human beings were the crowning achievement of the God. So the emphasis on human rationality encouraged people to question traditional beliefs, seek knowledge through personal inquiry. So this curiosity extended to all fields, not just medicine and theology, but art, literature, music, politics, and importantly, science as well. So the concept of a humanism resulted in a context of creating humanities. So where they studies literature and art and music and calligraphy as well. So the disciplines of humanities were also encouraged during the Renaissance era, that the purpose of the observation and education is not just that you are going to study the medicine and theology, but then you need to study the art, literature, music, poetry. So this is how this curiosity and the intellectual momentum accelerated, and Italian city-states were the hub of these activities. Moreover, thanks to the wealthy patrons like the Medici family, they sponsored scholars and artists. They financially supported them so that they can pursue their research and innovation. And the figures that were sponsored by Medici family were like Leonardo da Vinci and later on Michelangelo, who blended art, engineering, and nautical study during that time period. Another key dynamic that occurred in that time period, particularly around 1440, was the Gutenberg press, which made books more accessible and helped spread these ideas throughout Europe. So in short, the Italian, this Renaissance, this cultural revivalist movement laid the intellectual groundwork for later on scientific thought by reviving ancient wisdom and promoting human curiosity. So another, the bigger change that occurred was in 16th century, the Reformation movement, and it was a religious revivalist move, where Martin Luther, a German professor, he challenged the Catholic Church, and he criticized the belief system of Catholic Church and their policies and their practices. And he wrote a 95 thesis. He placed them against the building of a church, and these 95 were objections against the Catholic Church. So Martin Luther challenged the authority of the church. As a result of that, the monopoly on knowledge that church had, it declined. And the contributions of Martin Luther, and followed by John Calvin and Spinoza, So it triggered literacy and individual interpretation of the text. So Reformation played another critical role in terms of the scientific revolution. And the hub of this Reformation movement was the Holy Roman Empire, the Central Europe, the German states, Wittenberg, where Martin Luther challenged the belief system and the practices and the policies of the Catholic Church. So the Reformation, it was a religious movement that began in early 16th century when Luther nailed his 95 Theses to a church door in Germany. Luther wasn't directly challenging science, but he was challenging the ultimate authority of the Catholic Church. For centuries, the church had control not only spiritual life, but also education and intellectual discourse as well. So church was a very powerful institution in Europe during that time period. So it was not just confined to the spiritual and the moral aspects of life, but rather church was controlling the information. Church was providing education, and church was politically very powerful institution. Even church owned the mercenaries, their own paid soldiers, and economically they were very influential as well. They were holding lands, and church had the privilege to take taxes as well. So in all aspects of a human life, the church was prevalent, the church was everywhere. So when Martin Luther challenged uh, the belief system and the practices of the Catholic Church, it was meant that risking his life, because questioning the church during that time period was that he was risking his life. And particularly a practice that he challenged was the practice of indulgence. So church was engaged in a practice known as indulgence. So the practice was actually that church used to issue certificates to the commoners, and commoners can buy those certificates, and they were supposed to pay to the church in terms of buying those certificates. And the commoners who bought those certificates, then they could seek the salvation. They can directly enter the heaven. Like their sins would be purified. So if the commoners paid more taxes, and if they if they gifted them their well, and if they bought these indulgences, so they can seek the salvation. So Martin Luther challenged such practices, and followed by later reformers like John Calvin, they also challenged such practices. And Luther translated the Bible in multiple languages, which then enabled the commoners to read and interpret the holy text for themselves, rather than depending on the church leaders. So his stance was that if we believe on God, the Jesus Christ, and read the Bible, so and perform a very basic uh, sacraments practices, so we can seek the salvation. There's no need to gift our wells. There's no need. There was no need to purchase those indulgences. So this idea of individual interpretation of the text and the personal conscience had a major consequences for the Western civilization. It promoted literacy. Now the commoners were reading the scripture on their own. They were interpreting the religious scripture. Moreover, the printing press again played a very decisive role in spreading these new ideas rapidly. So the result of this reformist, the movement of Reformation, the result of this movement was that it weakened, it undermined the authority of the church, because church dictated people that how people should think about the world and the natural world and the social affairs. So this Reformation movement, it undermined the authority of the church. People started questioning religious dogmas, because even in Christianity, in Catholic Church, the view about the natural world was that it's the Earth which was the center of the universe, and other planets revolve against, rotate and revolve against the Earth. So Copernicus, followed by Galileo, they challenged these ideas. So now commoners started to question the belief and the practices of the Catholic Church, and then it opened to questioning the natural world as well. Now people were not just questioning the belief system and the practice of the Catholic Church, but now they were questioning their views about the natural world as well. So the Reformation, therefore, helped legitimize dissent, fostered a spirit of inquiry that would be crucial for the scientific progress. So another development that contributed in terms of triggering and facilitating the scientific revolution was the age of Enlightenment, where the British Enlightenment philosophers, such as Francis Bacon, John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, the celebrated reason, and then later on the French philosophers, René Descartes, a mathematician, Immanuel Kant, a Prussian philosopher, Voltaire, Rousseau, they challenged the existing political order, the existing economic policies and the practices of these great powers, and they challenged the authority of the church as well. So they focused on logic, reason, and empirical evidence. So their belief was in progress, human potential, and the key thinkers Descartes, Locke, Kant, and Voltaire played key role during the Enlightenment era. So by 17th and 18th centuries, the Enlightenment emerged as a philosophical movement that emphasized reason, science, and progress. Enlightenment thinkers believed that through rational inquiry and empirical observations, humans could improve society and understand the universe, the natural world as well. So rationalism and empiricism. So these were the two foundations that would play a key role in terms of triggering the scientific revolutions, that we can come to know about the natural world as well as the social world through thinking process, rationalism, and through observations, empiricism. So empiricism and rationalisms were the foundations of scientific revolution. And these two methods helped in terms of understanding the human society and the natural world. So during the Enlightenment time period, in 1784, a Prussian philosopher named Immanuel Kant published a short essay entitled "What is Enlightenment?" So he argued that Enlightenment was all about the courage to think for oneself, to question the accepted notions of any field of human knowledge. So, as a result of the Enlightenment, the age of reason, where these various philosophers expressed their ideas, uh, there occurred intellectual momentum. Ideas were now exchanged between thinkers in a network of learning, and that itself provided a kind of intellectual momentum. Enlightenment thinkers embraced the idea that scientific progress was limitless. They argued that all citizens should be equal before the law, equality before the law. So they would talk about natural rights of the individuals, life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness. They claim that even in terms of the politics, they claim that the best forms of government were those which were based on rational laws oriented to serving the public interests. So they questioned the Enlightenment philosophers. They questioned not only just the religious authority, but also tradition. The argument was that the French philosophers' argument was that the French society was a decadent society. They need to reform that. They need to recreate that. So the ideas of the English and then the French philosophers during the Age of Reasons, it triggered the American Revolution. It contributed towards triggering the French Revolution as well. So they challenged not only just the Catholic institutions, belief system, and practices, but they also challenged their norms, their societal norms and culture and values. They challenged the institution of monarchy as well, because absolute monarchs were ruling in Europe. In France, the absolute monarchy was there. And then monarchy used to claim that the king was made the king because God made him the king. They used to claim divinity, the divine right. So the Enlightenment philosophers challenged it, starting from Hobbes, and followed by Locke, Rousseau, Voltaire. They challenged the claim of the king that he was made king by God. So they challenged absolute monarchy. And in terms of cultural practices, they challenged the superstition of the commoners. Thinkers like René Descartes promoted rational deduction, famously saying that I think, therefore I am. So his argument was that through thinking process, we can come to know about reality. So the essence of Enlightenment thinkers was that reality is out there, truth is there, objective laws are there, and we can come to know about those laws. Like Newton's ideas created this mindset that the universe was like a huge machine. So the universe was like a huge machine, and that machine had the fixed laws. So human beings as rational actors, inherently rational actors, that the idea came from the humanism of Renaissance era, that human beings as inherited as inherently rational, they can question, which again, the idea of questioning came from the Reformation. So during the age of reason, the idea was that human beings are inherently rational. They need to question the existing political, economic, and religious structures. And they need to know that what is out there, what is natural world. The argument was that the natural world was like a huge machine, having fixed laws, objective laws. And the argument was that we can come to know about those objective laws and the reality of the natural world, which is fixed, objective, and truth. So human beings can come to know about the reality of the natural world. But then the question came how we can come to know. If there is a reality in the natural world, then how we can come to know about that reality. So Enlightenment philosophers, empiricist philosophers like David Hume, John Locke, and the rationalist philosophers like Descartes, and then later on Immanuel Kant would give the idea of pure reason. So they argued through rationalism and empiricism. We can come to know the natural world, which is like a huge machine having fixed laws, objective laws, and we can come to know about those objective laws through empiricism and rationalism. So the next argument that they built, the discourse they built during this age of reason was that were not just interested in knowing the natural world, that what is out there in the natural world, how Earth rotates and revolves, why earthquakes occur. So now they stretched that argument, that discourse to the point that they were now interested in knowing human affairs. They were interested in knowing human psychology, that, about human brain and emotions, about psychological problems that humans face, about human society, sociology, that how we uh, manage our social institutions, how we deal with our social problems. And then the resources that were there in society, how we allocate those resources, the economics. So in terms of organizing human society in a better way, they came the ideas of political science, that there should be a government as an higher institution, and government should play a role in terms of organizing society in a better way. So Locke, Hobbes, these political scientists, the political philosophers, wrote in a context of politics then. So Locke, he was an empiricist philosopher. He advocated for natural rights of human beings, life, liberty, property. And the idea that he gave was that knowledge comes from experience, from senses, rather than just deduction. So he was more into empiricism. Then afterwards, Voltaire, a French philosopher, he championed free speech, criticized the policies of the Catholic Church, and he was in favor of tolerance, freedom of expression. He championed freedom of expression during the reign of Louis XIV, Louis XV, the French kings, the Bourbon kings of France. So these ideals of the Enlightenment era inspired scientists to trust their own observations and logic over inherited beliefs that came from the church. So,
excuse me, Zeeshan sir. I would just like to remind you that so it is 2:44, so we would like to end at 3 p.m. or 3:05 p.m. So you should know that.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to just wrap it up and manage it within the time as well.
Right.
So,
thank you.
Okay, sure. So the Enlightenment didn't replace religion. Rather, it offered a new lens, a new way for understanding existence, the natural world, the social affairs, one that prioritized facts, data, and experimentation. So this intellectual environment greatly supported the work of emerging scientists. The Enlightenment also promoted public access to knowledge through books, salons, and societies, which further accelerated the scientific exchange. The encyclopedia was there, and it was the brainchild of two major French philosophers, Denis Diderot and Albert. It was a full-scale attempt by these French philosophers to catalog, categorize and explain all human knowledge. The encyclopedia was explicitly organized to refute traditional knowledge, namely that provided by the church and the state. The claim was that the application of reason to any problem could result in its solution. So, scientific revolution, the emergence of scientific revolution was simultaneously triggered by the fusion of these three bigger movements. So later on, the institutional sports would be there, the academia and universities would also play a key role in that context. So Renaissance, the cultural revivalist movement, where they rediscovered the ancient text, and then the argument of humanism, rationality, and then the Reformation, where the authority of the church over knowledge was questioned, and then Enlightenment thinkers, they played a crucial role in the intellectual atmosphere that allowed the scientific revolution to flourish. The Renaissance reintroduced classical learning and encouraged curiosity. The Reformation promoted independent thought, weakened authoritarian control over knowledge. The Enlightenment emphasized reason, evidence, creating a culture that valued scientific inquiry. Together, these developments, they shifted how these developments changed. So these bigger developments shifted how Europeans approached the truth. So science wasn't just about collecting facts. It became a structured method for observation, hypothesis, and experimentation. Institutions like in England and the French Society of Science also supported and legitimized this approach. The scientific revolution didn't occur in isolation. It was the to ask, raise new questions, use new tools, and adopt new ways of thinking. The legacy and technology. The scientific method became the gold standard for acquiring knowledge. It also altered how people saw themselves and a place in the universe. Humans were no longer at the center of creation. Instead, they were part of a vast, large-governed cosmos universe that could be explored and understood. So thank you all so much for joining me today. And I really appreciate your time and intention. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zeeshan. It was truly thought-provoking and engaging. I do have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So the thinkers of the Enlightenment, Locke and Rousseau specifically, are also the ones who thought of the social contract theory. So do you think that the social contract theory was maybe an extension of the Renaissance?
So, yeah, both Rousseau and then Locke, and before Locke, Hobbes was there. They gave the social contract theory. And the social contract theory was that in terms of the politics, in terms of the social contract that they wanted to create in a society was that they challenged the divinity, the divine right theory of the gang. So, in terms of extension of Renaissance was more in a context of a cultural revivalist movement, and where the argument in the Renaissance was that humans are rational, inherently good. So if human beings are rational, inherently good, if they can cooperate, so then humans should be given the right to choose their representatives. So in that context, Renaissance ignited, triggered such ideas. So that is the reason that I'm talking and discussing these concepts, that how the Renaissance and Reformation and Enlightenment era, how these bigger developments shape the modern concepts of a states. So the ideas, the key features of Renaissance, which ignited these ideas and curiosity. So it gives the people the right that they are rational, they should be given the right to choose their representatives. And then the Reformation, where the church was challenged, so that would be coming. So the Reformation would be contributing towards these social contract ideas, because the social contract in all these social contract theorists would challenge the claim of the king that he was made king by God. So the concept of humanism of the Renaissance era, and the authority that was challenged, the authority of the church that was challenged during the Reformation era. These movements then contributed towards the Enlightenment, and then in terms of coming up with these ideas of a social contract theorist, where they would be challenging the political structure, the economic order, and the societal practices of that time period. So this is how that it contributed towards these ideas.
Right, thank you so much. So if anybody else has a question in the audience, you are welcome to ask.
Thank you, Zeeshan sir. It was really very, what I should say, enlightening about enlightenment. So I would also like to encourage question and answer. That I would also like to say that usually, since our partners are ECUSF, and that's an international organization, so that's why our mode of communication is English. But when we notice that, if our audience is primarily from Pakistan, so we also encourage that, it's a bilingual session then, and participants can ask questions in Urdu as well.
Yeah, sure, obviously. They are encouraged to ask questions and build a discourse and generate a debate. So the floor is open there. I highly appreciate if they ask questions.
So meanwhile, the participants, they are encouraged to ask questions. I would also like to, it was, काफी इसमें सवाल raise हुए, and I would also maybe first give opportunity to maybe Khalil Saab if he wants to ask something or comment.
Sure.
Thank you, Zeeshan Saab, for this very interesting talk. Obviously, it's an eye-opening, like, for instance, that the theory that humans are rational inherently. Now, why did it take more than 280,000 years to reach this conclusion? Because humans have existed more than 300,000 years. Only in the 15th or 16th century in the Europeans, this is what. So it's there are still many unanswered theories of how humans have evolved, and one of the aspect that I see that is not discussed in your presentation is what has been the role of wars and conflicts um, during the European Renaissance or Reformation, because um, I see that though there was a period where a lot of bloody wars took place. from 12th century to 18th century. Did it help in forming an thought process behind Reformation, Enlightenment, or Renaissance? And another comment is whether the fate and reason can coexist together, or it's either these are two opposite phenomena. This is what and yeah, so these are not really the question, but my comments on that.
Yeah, sure. So, in terms of the role of the wars and conflicts, in terms of these bigger developments, and then how it all led towards the scientific revolution. So, when we examine the Renaissance in Italy, like in Italian city-states like Florence, Milan, uh, and Venice. So, uh, why Italy became the hub of this Renaissance movement? Why there was a revival of culture, music, art, and poetry? And, and and the factor behind that was like there was stability. So, particularly in Italian city-states, they were not at wars. And the role of religion was also declined in Italian city-states. There is an event known as Babylonian captivity, where the Pope went to the France in Anglican area rather than staying in Rome. So one aspect that was there was that that the church was weakened in Italian city-states, where there was a space for the culture and the art, and Italian city-states were not at war. Moreover, in terms of politics, like the Venice became republic. So the conducive, favorable environment where there was a political republics, economically they were engaged, they were interacting with the Muslim part of the world, with the Balkans, with the Turks, with the Ottoman Turks. So there was like the exchange, like the beginning of globalization, cultural exchange were there. And then the plague also played a key role. The pandemic that came that wiped out the, huge numbers. So after that pandemic, and then the reduced influence of the church and stability in terms of security, so the cultural flourished and thrived. But if we talk about Reformation, obviously, then it do led towards the bloody wars and conflicts. So 1500 onwards, 16th century onwards, when Martin Luther challenged the Catholic Church, its policies and belief system, he was forced to recant, to retreat from his words. But in terms of then political aspects, like Martin Luther was in Central Europe, and that was during that time period known as Holy Roman Empire. An Austrian emperor, the Habsburgs were ruling Central Europe. For a Habsburg king, which was from the Austrian Empire, for an Austrian king from a Habsburg family to rule in Central Europe, they needed the support of German states. So the German kings protected Martin Luther, but eventually it triggered the wars between the Catholics and the Protestants. So the wars between Protestants and Catholics, like these ideas where the Catholic Church was their belief system and practices were condemned, it led towards then conflicts in the European part of the world, particularly the Dutch revolted against the Habsburgs, against Austrians, and Austrians were ruling in Spain as well. So this Reformation did lead towards conflicts, and then it proliferated. The scale of the conflicts proliferated, where the Dutch revolted against the church, against the Catholic Church, and the Dutch Republic was proclaimed. So then there would be the rise of the Netherlands, the House of Orange would be there, and they would be playing a key role. And Netherlands emerged as a great power in international affairs in 1600 onwards. And then it also led towards the wars in Central Europe later on, particularly from 1618 to 1648. That war was known as the 30 Years' War. So there was a huge bloodshed in Central Europe. 50% of the population was wiped out because of that war. And then eventually, it led towards these religious aspects where the authority of church was undermined. It also these things also proliferated towards England, Britain as well, where the King of England also challenged the Catholic Church, and Anglican Church would be there in England. So the British Church also split from the Roman Church, and civil war in 1640s. The civil war occurred in England as well. So if we talk about the role of conflicts and wars. So particularly the Reformation triggered those religious wars, and as a result, the states that the challenge, so those became the safe havens for the Reformation thinkers, for the Enlightenment thinkers, like Rene Descartes. Ruth Spinoza would be giving very radical ideas. So Britain and the Netherlands became the hub for the intellectuals where they would go, and then they would raise questions. And the Dutch scientists and then the Britishers played a key role then in terms of triggering the scientific revolution as well. So this is how it played. As far as the discourse between faith and reason. So in our society, in our context, we say that yes, faith and reason can be compatible forces, can work simultaneously, because in our context, we do believe that Islam is a religion, it's an enlightened religion. And in Islam, the quotes are there that we need to think in observations. Pad apne Rabb ke naam se, read. The first word is Ikra bismi rabbika allazi khalaq. Pad apne Rabb ke naam se, read. Observations. So Islam encourages observations, empiricism, and so in that sense, I think both can work simultaneously. Even scientific truths can be refuted. We witness in last decades that even the scientific claims can be refuted and challenged. So my assessment is just faith and reason can coexist simultaneously, and it's necessary for the coherence in society as well as the overall peace in international affairs as well. Yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you, Zeeshan sir. And there's this question in the chat that, in your opinion, in which century most of the revolutions took place in mathematics and in major scientific fields by Muslims?
So the question is like, what do you think in which century most revolutions took place? There is revolutions like, for example, if we talk about Renaissance, it was a revolution. It occurred in 14th century. The Reformation, 16th century.
I think the question is trying to ask that if you know about in which era Muslims made their scientific revolutions or their scientific contributions, especially by Muslims.
Yeah, it was earlier because the Muslims played a key role. Ibn Sina and then Al-Farabi, Ibn Khaldun, like those Muslim philosophers contributed way earlier in terms of science.
Yes, I think that was 1000 and 1100s, that sort of time frame.
And particularly when Muslims were ruling in Spain, the Umayyads were there in Spain, and when they during that time period, the role of the Muslim scientists were there.
Right, and then there's another question. I think that is very interesting. That from these historical scientific revolutions, Renaissance and Enlightenment that you have mentioned, like what lessons do we learn that we can apply to current debates of AI and data science and all this?
Yeah, the lessons from these bigger developments of Renaissance, Reformation, and then like Enlightenment, and then scientific revolution. So we need to embrace human ability to think, rationality, and in order to solve the contemporary problems in our society, in modern world, so we need to have collaborative work among various institutions where they need to work, and they need to follow the scientific methods in terms of fixing, solving the problems that we are currently facing. So if we identify the problems in terms of a politics or economy or in a context of a psychology, society, so through the rationalism and empiricism, and by cooperation among the people, the intellectuals, we can we can diagnose those problems, and then we can, like, if we diagnose the problems, the diseases, then we can rectify those situations. So there is a no that we can't retreat from what we progress, or we can't retreat from the scientific progresses that we achieved in last decades and centuries. So we need to further work on those things and identify those problems and address the issues.
Right, thank you. And of course, like the topic is such that there are so many questions, but I would like to ask one question, and then probably we would end. So at one point you आपने कुछ इस तरह की statement दी कि like regarding Martin Luther King, that he did not उन्होंने मतलब religion को sort of क्या कहें criticize नहीं किया, challenge नहीं किया, but to look at the religion with a different lens.
Yeah.
So मैं ये जानना चाह रहा था, like how can we apply it in in today's scenario, especially मतलब हम चाहते हैं कि हमने एक इस्लाम का बड़ा अच्छा दौर देखा है, और हम वो चाहते हैं कि वो दोबारा देखें जब एक ऐसी शक्ल थी इस्लाम की कि जब जिसमें हम साइंटिफिक प्रोग्रेस कर सकते थे, मैथमेटिकल प्रोग्रेस कर सकते थे.
Exactly.
So अब हम कैसे वो लेंस कैसे चेंज करें कि we tell the religious scholars कि we are not आपको हम किसी तरह जान नहीं छुड़ाना चाह रहे, we want to work together with you.
Exactly. उसमें particularly I was teaching at university to एक student ने भी इस तरह का question किया था. The question was कि during Reformation, Martin Luther ने क्या किया कि Bible को translate कर दिया in multiple languages. Bible was in Latin. तो जो Germans थे वो Latin नहीं पढ़ सकते थे. अब कोई भी उनका प्रॉब्लम होता था, वो चर्च के पास आते थे, चर्च क्लर्जी के पास, क्लर्जी उस टेक्स्ट को इंटरप्रेट करके they used to give them आंसर्स इंटरप्रेट किया करते थे. मार्टिन लूथर ने क्या किया, टेक्स्ट को मल्टीपल लैंग्वेजेस में ही ट्रांसलेटेड इन मल्टीपल लैंग्वेजेस और जर्मन में ट्रांसलेट कर दिया. सो वंस ही ट्रांसलेटेड द रिलीजियस स्क्रिप्चर, द सेक्रेड टेक्स्ट इन जर्मन लैंग्वेज, तो अब लोगों ने उस टेक्स्ट को खुद पढ़ना स्टार्ट किया, और जब खुद पढ़ना स्टार्ट किया, खुद उसको इंटरप्रेट कर रहे हैं. तो हमारे कॉन्टेक्स्ट में भी यही है कि अगर हम आज पाकिस्तान के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में बात करें, तो हमारा जो रिलीजियस स्क्रिप्चर है, टेक्स्ट है, इट्स इन अरब लैंग्वेज. अब अरबी ज़बान, अरबिक लैंग्वेज 80-90% जो ऑडियंस है हमारी, 80-90% जो जनरल कॉमनर्स हैं, उनको उस टेक्स्ट की मतलब मीनिंग नहीं आता. تو
Hmm.
جب تک کہ جس طرح سے مارٹن لوتھر نے اس ٹیکسٹ کو انٹرپریٹ کیا جرمن لینگویج میں، اور جرمنز نے اپنے مذہب کو، اپنے بلیفس کو سمجھنا شروع کیا، اسی طرح سے وی نیڈ دیٹ ریفارمیشن موومنٹ ان پاکستان. ایٹ لیسٹ وی نیڈ ٹو نو نا کہ جب ایک امام صاحب ایک بیان دے رہے ہیں، بات کر رہے ہیں، تو ہمیں پتا تو ہو اس کا میننگ کیا ہے. اب
Exactly.
مذہب یہ تو نہیں ہے کہ آپ نے عربک لینگویج جسٹ پڑھ لی ہے اور اس سے آپ کو ثواب آبویسلی مل جائے گا، لیکن اس کا ہماری زندگی پہ کیا امپیکٹ ہے، اس کا ہمارے سوشل رویوں پہ کیا امپیکٹ ہے، وہ ہمیں دیکھے نظر نہیں آتا. سو اسلام واز ناٹ مینٹ کہ جسٹ آپ نے ورشپ ہی کرنی ہے، بلکہ یو ہیو ٹو جو ہے وہ انسانوں کی خدمت بھی کرنی ہے. وہ مسنگ ہے ہمارے ہاں کہ ہم لوگوں کے لیے آسانیاں کریٹ کریں، ان کے ساتھ کھڑے ہوں، پرابلمس کو مل کے ایڈریس کریں، جس میں چاہے ایک میتھمیٹیشین ہے، ایک سوشل سائنٹسٹ ہے، اور ایک مذہب سے شخص ہے، تو سارے مل کے ایشوز کو سمجھنے کی کوشش کریں اپنے اپنے اینگل سے، اور مل کے اس مسئلے کا حل ڈھونڈیں.
اور شان صاحب مطلب پورے مسلم بلاک کا ہی یہ مسئلہ ہے، اٹس ناٹ جسٹ پاکستان کے، وہ پورا مسلم بلاک ہی بیکورڈنیس کا شکار ہے.
مسلم یعنی کہ ان ٹرمز آف ٹیکس تو پھر ہم دیکھیں تو اس میں تو پاکستان، انڈیا یا بنگلہ دیش میں یہ ایشوز ہیں ان ٹرمز آف لینگویج، لیکن پوری مسلم دنیا میں جب ہم علم، سائنٹیفک ریولوشن، یعنی ہم علم کی دنیا میں پیچھے کیوں رہ گئے ہیں.
جی میں پورے مسلم دنیا کے حوالے سے تھوڑا جاننا چاہ رہا ہوں کہ
پورے مسلم if we talk about the Muslim world, that why we are lagging behind in terms of a scientific revolution. So I think in terms of the way we are governed by our state institutions, اگر ہم مسلم دنیا کے اسٹیٹس کے پولیٹیکل ماڈلس کو ایگزامن کریں تو ایک اسٹرینج قسم کی، یونیک قسم کی ایک پیٹرن آئیڈینٹیفائی آپ کریں گے. ایجپٹ، ٹرکی، پاکستان، سینٹرل ایشین ریپبلکس کو دیکھ لیں، جی سی سی کنٹریز کو دیکھ لیں. سو وی ہیو دیٹ ٹینڈنسی ٹوورڈ اتھارٹیرینزم، اس میں اسٹیٹ کنٹرول کر رہی ہے اور وہ چیزیں مینیج کر رہے ہیں، اور وہ پھر ایز اے ریزلٹ آف دیٹ ماڈلز جو ہیں، the way we are being governed, I think وہ ایک ریزن ہے جس میں کہیں نہ کہیں ہمیں ایلیٹ کیپچر نظر آ رہے ہیں، اور اس میں کہ ایک پرٹیکولر پھر سیگمنٹس کو جو ہے وہ اپ لفٹ کیا جا رہا ہے. اور جو ایجوکیشن سسٹم ہے ہمارا، جہاں سے سائنس کی تعلیم اور ترقی اور ریسرچ میں ساری چیزیں ہوں گی، اس پہ پھر کوئی اتنا فوکس نہیں ہے، کیونکہ وہ پاور گریب اور اس اتھارٹی کی طرف جا رہے ہیں رادر دین کہ وہ ایکچوئل اس طرف آئیں. تو مسلم دنیا کو اگر ہم دیکھیں تو جو میری اسیسمنٹ ہے اس میں یہ ہے کہ مسلم اسٹیٹس کے پولیٹیکل ماڈلس کو جب ہم اسیس کرتے ہیں تو وہاں پہ اس طرح سے لبرل ڈیموکریٹک ماڈلز نہیں ہیں جہاں پہ کامنرس کی بات کی جائے، نیچرل رائٹس کی بات کی جائے، لائف، لبرٹی، پراپرٹی، پرسوٹ آف ہیپینس، جہاں ایک فریڈم ہو، ایک اسپیس ہو انکوائری کی، ڈسکورس کی. تو ہم لوگ پھر تھوڑا سا ڈرتے بھی ہیں کہ کہاں تک ہم انکوائر کر سکتے ہیں. اور so this is how that these things have been.
رائٹ ذیشان صاحب، تھینک یو سو مچ. بہت سوال ایسا ٹاپک ہے کہ انشاءاللہ we'll invite you again. I think Khalil صاحب would agree with me.
جی بالکل. آئی تھنک ابھی بہت اس پہ گریٹفل ٹو ذیشان صاحب فار
So it's honor,
connect.
it's my honor. It's a privilege to be part of the community and this entire
Yeah, we
discourse.
could host something on it's session 2 on that, where we could focus on I don't know whether you آپ کے اس میں ایمبٹ میں آتے نہیں آتا، جس میں ہم سائنٹیفک لیگیسیز آف مسلم ورلڈ اس کو ڈسکس کر سکتے ہیں.
Yes.
Would be possible, but it depends on you.
Let's just give me time. Let's see if I could manage that part, because I'm more into the Western philosophy or Muslim part of the world, maybe Mr. Han said.
Right. That's why I thought that it depends
Expertise
on
नहीं है.
your
Yeah,
expertise.
exactly. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
But nevertheless, it was very interesting to see.
Mm.
Or I think one of the key takeaways that I take it from the final comment of why the Muslim or Islamic world, um, it's the appreciation and the value for rationality, question. Even if you have a differing views, you have the capacity to listen to opposing views. I think वो जो values हैं वो हमारे world में हमारे part में बहुत कम है.
Exactly.
So that's the fundamental जो मुझे uh, I, I look at things from that perspective. It's nobody's right or wrong, but it's being able to listen to someone with a differing and opposing views and being
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
The
So
same
that's
ideas by by by
yeah,
by the Voltaire, that if I even didn't agree what you say, I'll defend your right to say till my death. This
yeah.
is what Voltaire stated.
तो ये values I think हमारे हमें establish नहीं कर
Exactly.
पाए. But anyways, it's
Exactly.
a great learning from you, and thank you for your time and opportunity to spend with us.
No, it's
so,
been on. It's really privileged.
so now I would request Ms. Hafsa to formally conclude the session.
Okay. So before we wrap up, we encourage all the attendees to take a moment to fill out our feedback form. I've sent it in the chat. And once again, thank you all for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you all in the next session of Science Chronicles.
All right. Thank you so
Okay.
much. And
Thank you.
Chansa, once again, thank you. And inshallah, we'll see you again. And so now we can, end this session.
Okay. Thank you so much.